All right, everyone, it's quite a task to keep sort of tabs on what's going on in Venezuela. You got to understand that sometimes with like a tin horn regime, you get a suppression of actually news getting out of the country. And so then it becomes murky because if someone who doesn't like Maduro wants to make like propaganda, it actually makes it really easy for them because they can make up any wild claim that they want from within or without. It's not really going to be challenged because it fits into one dimensionality. So you can actually get like anti-socialist propaganda, oddly enough, in an insular state. It's easier for that to stick. But most of these stories can be corroborated. And apparently what's happening now is that parts of their medical infrastructure are broken down to the point where they're basically non-working. Interesting little figure that they had there just on malaria alone. The number of cases has grown from only a few thousand apparently per year, like in the 80s and earlier on. The military there takes care of the anti-malarial sort of campaign to hundreds of thousands now. So you've got a return of diseases that, in many parts of Latin America have been partially or completely suppressed and have no longer remained relevant per se. It's like here. The United States used to have some malaria cases. We used sanitation and DDT primarily to prevent that from continuing to be a problem. And it actually worked. Plague. Remember, during the San Francisco earthquake, think about this. The medical apparatus of the post-San Francisco earthquake period was capable of suggesting that people kill a bunch of rats in order to prevent disease outbreak in the wake of the disaster there that had leveled and burned most of the city. Meanwhile, Venezuela, that has not suffered such a problem and has, of course, a far larger economy than a single city, can't actually even carry out an anti-malarial campaign. Diphtheria has come back. Part of this is due to the fact that money gets diverted to debt payments because they made unwise investments. And so now you've got a situation where infrastructure can't be properly maintained. Cleaning the water. I guess the water purifier has to wait another month. Don't worry, though. We can put a coffee filter under it. That's basically what you're going to have to do. This is interesting because even in the most desperate times in a place like Cuba, there was at least enough proper management and diversification of the economy, apparently, to make sure that people had access to the most rudimentary medicine. Maybe not like Michael Moore sicko, like, praise these generous Cubans giving us, a bucket of inhalers for $1. Okay, that's a little bit over the top. You're not understanding the difference between simple preventative medicine or very highly skilled medicine on one end and then everything in the middle on the other that Cuba totally lacks for the most part. With Venezuela, you don't get any of them. Apparently, pharmacies have begun to stock bottles of water just to have bottles on the shelves because they've run out of so many medicines. Not a big surprise. This is a highly centralized system. The problem isn't even the socialism itself. When people ramble and rave about socialism only, they're ignoring part of the equation is it an interventionist system or is it an efficient redistribution that itself doesn't actually fuck up the function of the economy as a whole? It's just redistributing wealth created in a private system. If you have an economy that's more or less fully privatized and therefore is better, is more efficient, less abusive, you will then be capable of taking some revenue and redistributing it more easily without fucking up the economy. It's about, of course, finding that balance. I say we've gone way past our own balance, but it's still better than a fully centralized system. In Venezuela, the military and the government at large control virtually all aspects of society. From cradle to grave, everything is done according to the rigors of central planning. It's a centrally planned system. It's not capitalistic in any way, shape, or form. Therein lies the problem. They could get away with the socialistic side if they had still had some central planners there that were wise enough to invest in aspects of the economy other than, hey, we're giving people subsidies and freebies on the backs of just oil and only investing in oil. While oil prices have risen a little bit over the last few years, it isn't enough. They can't make their payments. They squandered a bunch of money. And the government has to account for it. Meanwhile, in other news, Maduro will be the one running yet again for the Socialist Party. He'll be elected because they don't really have, at this point, there's no such thing as an election there either. It's no longer a representative or constitutional system. Maduro openly violated their constitution. Nobody did anything about it. Maduro can have an opposition leader arrested at any time. Nobody's going to do jack shit about it. Assassinating people. Nobody does anything about it. He's a dictator. Don't call it the government of Venezuela doesn't fundamentally exist anymore. It is Nicolas Maduro, running the show. It's him and his inner circle that he handpicks, and he purges the military and gets sort of upstarts. And he pulled a Vlad the Impaler. This is actually a very wise strategy. You kick out the old gentry, and then you bring in the young, the lesser nobles, the upstarts, the nouveau riche or something, and make them beholden to you. That's exactly what Maduro's done throughout the government and military. So the chances overall of them, putting a bullet between his eyes fundamentally drop off like a rock. Now, there's still a possibility that some brave Venezuelan decides to just hurl a Molotov cocktail into his car and burn him alive, but it's becoming less and less likely. I mean, if things can be that desperate in a country that for some decades was used to relative wealth, it was developing, things were okay. If that level of desperate misery can persist for years at a time, to the point where people are keeling over and eating zoo animals, there's very little chance that you're actually going to see them oust Maduro. I think some of it boils down to the fact that there's been so much anti-capitalism, anti-West propaganda there, that people are honestly afraid that if they make the switch, if they adapt and have a free market and open up, trade and relations with, the Western world, that they're going to lose their culture and be abused and be enslaved. And of course, from the outside looking in, it's difficult to imagine a scenario in which even outright slavery would be worse than what they already suffer with. Now, when most of your population can no longer reliably work because there's no longer reliably power, when you can't even export some of your oil because it costs more to ship it around than you're going to gain from it because of low efficiency, that's a problem. I would think that at some point, some wise person in Venezuela would say enough is enough. The opposition, though, corrupt and stupid as it is, they fumbled completely. They even sort of bent knee, and then they went in to talk to Maduro, and then, of course, Maduro killed off that helicopter dude who supposedly is a terrorist, or some people would say a liberation figure for capitalism or whatever. He kills him and some other people, and then they withdraw from the talks. They're like, well, you broke the toys, so now we're not going to play with you. And it's just shit. And the people of Venezuela, by rights, by having so much fucking oil, never should have been in this mess. There never should have been those mass debt payments based on speculation as to how big the economy is going to be over the next decade because we've got all this oil and everyone wants oil. Oh, don't worry, the oil price will never, collapse by 2/3. It's never going to happen. Ha ha ha. Peak oil has been achieved. Basically, they listened to the liberals, and they were wrong. Unfortunately for them. So Bernie Sanders' workers' paradise now has medical shortages that are commensurate with a total third world situation. It's no longer a half-assed developed nation that was still, making ends meet. It's no longer making ends meet. They're out of all the necessary stuff. They don't have the drugs anymore to prevent people who get transplants from rejecting the organs. Apparently, they've run out of it, so people are losing kidneys and lungs and stuff. Yeah, that would be painful. That'd be pretty bad. What happens if you no longer even have, the stuff you need to sterilize before you cut that dying kidney back out of their body? It's like, here's some rum, dude, from Cuba. You're going to need it. So, drink up. We're going to pull your back open, rip the kidney out. Try to... We don't have any surgical thread anymore. We've got some floss that we can use, so we're going to sew you back up with floss. And then figure out what we can do. Well, don't worry, you can keep the bottle of rum. Just make sure that I get a shot after the operation because I'm going to have the jitters. That's about all. Peace out.